Hello, it's Bree, your host, and welcome back to Into the Story. This is a podcast about real human stories and how communication shapes the moments that change us. In today's episode, you'll hear Hilary's story. Hilary was offered what felt like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a promotion, a seat at the table, and a chance to finally step into leadership. What followed was months of saying yes, working harder, stretching herself thinner, and ultimately feeling like she was failing. This is a story about ambition, pressure, and the quiet cost of avoiding difficult conversations. Okay, let's get into the story.
Hilary, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
It's great to be here.
Today, you are going to tell us a story about something that happened to you in your professional life. Can you take us to that room?
Yes, I can. I remember it very vividly now. I'm sitting at my desk in my office. There's no window. I'm sitting there and I feel the bright light coming down on my skin. My head is in my hands and there's a pile of papers that are strewn across the table. I'm hunched forward, my elbows are on the table, and I'm looking down at my shoes. They are these red Sarah Flint shoes, heels. I'd bought them a couple of weeks earlier and I had them shipped out from New York. They were $500. It felt completely absurd. I told myself that they were for this. They were for this moment of what I thought would be stepping into a new role where I had finally been seen, where I'd been given this opportunity to step up, and this was my moment. 6 months earlier, I'd been given what felt like an irresistible opportunity, a chance to be promoted from an individual contributor role, so a role where I was responsible for myself, I wasn't leading a team, to a general manager role and responsible for a team of 10.
So tell us, where were you working at the time? What type of position were you in? What exactly was your job?
I was working in a quasi-legal role, or a sort of a somewhat legal role in an HR department. So I was responsible for the legal end of human resources, contracts, hiring and firing, restructures, and navigating conflict and change and advising managers on that in the workplace.
And do you want to tell us what the company was, where you were living at the time?
Yeah, I was working for a very large healthcare organisation in Australia. I was living in Sydney, and the workplace that I was going to was about an hour or so from where I lived.
Oh, wow. So it was, you really wanted to be there. That's a big commute, right? An hour from where you lived.
Yeah, Sydney's a big city, and this was outside of Sydney City, but it was a commitment. It was a commute, but I'd also been at the company for quite a long time.
So then I understand that if you were working in the legal side of HR, you studied law, I imagine.
I did, yes.
Tell us about that. Was it it must have been a long road.
Many years studying law, yes, and then in private practice, working as a traditional lawyer in a law firm, and then I'd moved into a company to work in a in-house legal HR role.
Okay, so then Why was it so irresistible? And what was the conversation, and who did you have a conversation with? What was said that made this opportunity so exciting for you?
Well, the CEO offered me the position, so it became which made it even more irresistible because the person that would ultimately employ me was coming to talk to me about it. In fact, he'd come to me personally, and he'd asked me to step in on an acting basis initially. He encouraged me to apply for the permanent role, and he'd said that he'd back me, and he said that it was mine to lose.
So then if he said, stepping in on an acting role, that means that perhaps somebody wasn't able to do the job. They asked you to step in very quickly, and then he encouraged you to apply to be permanently in that position.
Yes.
That's right?
Yes.
And then he said, this is yours. If you don't jump up and grab it, someone else will take it, kind of thing.
Yes. It was put to me as an opportunity, but as very much a backed opportunity, and a need that hopefully that I would be fulfilling for them. And so I'd said yes very quickly. And I said yes to...
Like you said yes the same day? It was he came to you and asked you and you said yes?
Before he finished his sentence. I was very keen. But I not only said yes quickly, but I said yes to everything. And that meant long hours. It meant a lot of travel to the site daily. It meant late nights. It meant early mornings. It meant being available and always on. It meant blurred lines of duty because I had a substantive role. I had a role that I was already performing. More responsibility. And it also meant moving from what I was at the time, which was an expert or a subject matter expert, to a role where it's not so much about expertise, it's about making decisions and leading a team. And I said yes very quickly without necessarily thinking through the difference of what that might mean. On top of that, it also meant less sleep.
Okay. Less sleep, that's never a good thing, is it? What did your private life look like at this time? Because I imagine that you were maybe barely even at home during all of these late nights, early mornings, commuting, always on your phone. I imagine. What did home look like?
Yeah, I had stretched myself pretty thin, not just professionally, but emotionally and at home. At that time, I had a young family. I had a 16-month-old son and a husband who was in a busy corporate role himself. I did tell myself, though, that this was a temporary step up in workload, that it was what was required to move up in the corporate ladder to get a seat at a table, and that once I got there, or once I was able to prove myself, then life would be more balanced.
Mm-hmm. Is there a moment that you remember from that time, like a snapshot? If I asked you to think back to that time of trying to get this promotion or stepping in, what comes to mind? Can you explain a scene, a day, a conversation you remember having?
There wasn't so much a moment as a series of moments. A general sense of no matter how hard I worked, no matter what level of sacrifice I gave, I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough or potentially worthy enough for the permanent role. And this showed up in the mornings when I would drive there and the fear that I would have. And one moment in particular I remember where we had a meeting that I had to attend, and before going to that meeting I had to drop my son to to childcare, and I had to drive an hour to get to the workplace, and I was running in such a panic of being late, of being the last one in the room, and I had actually no idea about what we were going to be talking about. I was just so concerned that I was going to be showing up late. And this level of panic that I was not on top of things.
And so you get into the room that specific day, and do you remember what happened? Do you remember, like, paint us a picture? I have had that feeling of arriving late somewhere. It's the worst, but I can't imagine the pressure of being in a race to get a promotion. You know that you're being judged, you're being watched, and you arrive late at a meeting. Can you paint us that scene?
It's quite chaotic. And there's lots of, yes, I mean, in that moment in particular, I remember driving fast through the car park up to find a car spot. I remember fumbling for my keys, leaving my bag in my car, running with my heels clicking on the ground to the elevator, running up the stairs, being out of breath as I walked into the room, and everybody else is there, already seated and looking at me. And I know that I am looking disheveled.
And then how late were you? Were you very late, or was it just not a big deal?
Well, it was about 15 minutes late, and I mean 15 minutes late for an executive meeting is probably not ideal. But I also had travelled an hour in the car, and I know that people knew that I lived not around the corner, that I had to drive, and I had to take my child to childcare beforehand, and that I was trying really hard to get there. But the level of panic, I think, was more alarming for them than me being 15 minutes late. It was how I actually arrived.
So how you handled the stress, basically, that you were. Did you say anything? Did you walk into the room and apologize, or did you just sit down and let the meeting continue?
I apologized profusely, and then sat down. Yes. And I don't recall saying anything during that meeting. In fact, I don't really recall what was discussed, because I think at that time I was too concerned with the fact that I had arrived late in such a way that had really shown that I was really not on top of things.
Mm-hmm. So I have this picture then. You studied law for a very long time, become a lawyer, transition out of that more traditional law role into this big company. You have a good job, and then you get a dream promotion, and you spend 6 months giving everything over to this position, doing your absolute best, and you're literally running to make it work. So now take me to this moment when you're sitting in your office and the CEO comes in.
So the CEO comes into my office, and he tells me that they've chosen somebody else for the permanent role over me. And he said he knows that he tells me that I've worked hard, but I've stopped listening at that point in time. And I only really remember those first couple of words, that I wasn't chosen effectively for the role. But I remember more the internal reaction that was happening inside of me. The immediate sensation was one of rejection, of I'm not good enough for the role. And then that moved into a sensation of embarrassment, because this was something public. People knew that I was in the acting role, that I had applied for the permanent role, that I wanted that permanent role. And they may already know, or would very soon know, that I didn't get it. and I would have to face back into that. I also felt this deeper feeling of, and this was perhaps more of a very angry feeling of being misled, because I believed what the CEO had told me, that he effectively had wanted me for the job. He'd come out, he'd sought me out personally, he'd put me in the acting role, he'd said that he'd back me. And so I felt that I had been misled in what was actually on offer. And then soon after feeling that I'd been misled, I then suddenly felt that, oh no, what might even be worse is that I misread. That I misread. In fact, there was never a promise. I misread the situation. I misread hopefulness as a promise. I misread, here is something that we hope for you to succeed in, but you may not be ultimately the successful candidate for this, with this is yours. And so all of these emotions hit me within a very short space of time. And I remember being in a complete daze. I don't remember the rest of what he said. I remember him leaving the room. I remember myself sitting at the table, and I remember slumping over it and looking down at those red shoes, because they were such a symbol of misfit or missed moment, a missed moment, and coming to this edge of something, coming to the edge of a feeling, a realization surfacing that I don't want to be in this situation again. That I don't want this. I don't want this. Because up until that point in time, I was very much committed to having a seat at the table. And something deep within me was actually saying to me, maybe you want to be the table. Maybe you want to have your own table. And it was in that moment that I actually, something in me started to form around, I need to do my own, I need to create my own thing here. I need to pool my resources, my experience, my capabilities, and I need to create my own work, take on my own risk, be responsible for my own self.
Hilary's story ends at a moment that many of us will recognize. The moment when something we wanted deeply doesn't work out. Hilary did stay on with the organization for another 6 months, supporting the person who was chosen for the promotion that she thought that she would get. And eventually, she made a difficult decision. She chose to leave and build her own work, supporting leaders to navigate difficult conversations, conflict, and change with more clarity and steadiness. Today, Hilary works with leaders across Australia, Europe, and the UK. You can learn more about her and her work at hilarysutton.co. I will leave you a link in the show notes. In next week's bonus episode, Hilary and I will pick up the story from here. We talk about what she learned, the conversations she avoided, and the practical tools that she now uses to help others face hard conversations more honestly and calmly. If this story resonated with you, you definitely won't want to miss that conversation. And if you want to speak in a way that makes people listen, you can join my newsletter at intostory.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, I hope that you have a good time, or at least a good story to tell.